This is Brian Richardson, serial entrepreneur and founder of PrepToExit.com. Congratulations, you made it to phase 5, the closing phase. There's a lot of information to go on here. So as this video series has been going on, I've been building for you the picture of what it takes to be able to sell your company. And so today we're going to get into the last phase, the closing phase. And with this, we're going to talk about the due diligence process. We're going to talk about verifying the buyer's financial wherewithal. We're going to talk about deal progression and making sure that things are moving forward and how they move forward. We're going to talk about the legal factors and how attorneys are making they're earning their keep in the closing phase. We're going to talk about the actual closing and what it looks like to get money in your bank at that moment. And then, of course, we're going to cover the big E, the expectations, and then also any warning signs that could suggest that the deal is going to crash. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's talk about DD, due diligence. Now, remember in due diligence that there are no dumb buyers. They will look under the hood and they will be able to determine if anything that I represented ahead of time is in fact a reality or not, especially with a buyer that's done more than 1 or 2 purchases or acquisitions. They know what they're looking for. They know how to pay attention to it. And so just recognize during due diligence, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work. And they're also these. Buyers are people just like you and I. And they have their life that they're living, and they've got their perspectives, and they are going to be going through the process. I actually had a deal that got paused for a month because one of the lead players on the buyer side had to go through knee surgery. And because they're going to be out for knee surgery, the whole transaction paused for an entire month. During due diligence, the buyers are people too. As a seller, we're trying to get all of this information put out there. There is more information put forth during due diligence about your company than there is about your house. Take all of the things about your house and imagine having to have an owner's manual for every single item in your house that costs more than $100. Imagine having to pull out a copy of the warranty on everything that costs more than $100 or proof that there isn't a warranty. Imagine going and getting a copy of the certification from every professional that's ever worked on the house, from the architect to the contractor to the engineer. Imagine going to the city and getting all the permits that confirm that your house was allowed to be built or where it was built. That's the level of detail that due diligence is. Your accounting and your bookkeeping is going to be just pulled apart and looked for every little aspect. I heard of a seller that purchased a ski boat for 20 grand and listed it in the business on the balance sheet as a forklift. They wrote off a boat as a forklift. So when the buyer went to look at this, they said, well, where's your forklift? Why do you have a forklift if you're an architectural engineer? That kind of stuff shows up. So just know in the due diligence, every little piece of proof, you have to provide it, and they're going to be looking at it. And any aspect of the due diligence can dramatically alter the terms of the final deal. Just know that ahead of time. Okay, now the other thing is that there is going to be endless communication loops back and forth. They may start one, and they may send it your way from the buyer side. You may send it from the seller side. And so they're going to be asking questions. And it's going to be an endless loop. And just trust me, because they're people too, and they're coming from their perspective, the questions they may ask may have no common sense to them and may have no rhyme or reason. But the reality is there's a reason they're asking for it, and we as sellers have simply got to give up the information. There's going to be lots and lots of these communication loops, lots of emails, lots of phone calls, etc. Again, a third-party representative does a great job about being the barrier to frustration and being a barrier between the human on the seller side and the human on the buyer side, and keeping their emotions and human behaviors from being antagonistic. If you as a seller are really emotionally stable and mature, and you can handle a lot of stress, then you probably are going to deal with these communication cycles and loops without too much difficulty. But just be aware there's going to be a lot of it. If you think you're busy now in running your company, you're going to be doubly busy trying to fit in all of the workload of providing due diligence, answering questions, doing communication loops during a transaction. You're going to have all of your evenings, your weekends, your mornings are going to get taken up through the due diligence process of getting this information out to them if you weren't ready ahead of time. All right, now one of the challenges is dealing with staff. Is you have employees whose job it is to be able to have this information, and the question is, should you tell your staff or not, and how do you get all this information without the staff knowing? Like the vice president of operations, they're the ones that have filed away all of the leasing contracts for all of the equipment that your company owns. Well, you've got to go find those files. You've got to get copies of those documents for due diligence to hand to the buyer. So how do you get those without your vice president of operations knowing? And it's a challenge, and each seller has to make a determination on which employees will know which information on this. So just know that that's going to be in the mix with the staff. And then also, when the buyer finds information out, right, going back to this thing, they may see that what you thought was a great deal on the balance sheet as an asset, they may view it as nothing of value whatsoever. And with the volume of information that comes out during due diligence, any one of those pieces can alter their perspective of the deal, and so the price point can change and be different than what the letter of intent indicated. Okay? All right, so they're getting under the hood with due diligence. Now, let's shift over, and now let's talk about verifying the buyer's financial ability. This is different for every situation and every size of business. Some small business buyers may be using SBA loans, or they may be using equity out of their house, or they may be using their 401k, et cetera, et cetera. And so you delicately have to confirm that they really do have the financial wherewithal, and this is the point of doing it. Just like the buyer's looking under your hood to verify what's under the business, you also can lift up the hood a little bit and verify that the buyer actually has the money or the investors lined up to be able to actually close the deal. So that's going to be important to do that. Okay, so next is the deal progression, is making sure that everything is happening smoothly and it's going on the way it needs to go on. So due diligence, you can put a time limit on it in a deadline, right? So you may say that this is 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 60 days, etc., just for the due diligence, okay? And so the letter of intent needs to have a time window of the due diligence, that it needs to be fair enough to give them time to consider everything and retrieve it, but it needs to give you enough time to be able to hand it over. It can't be so long that they get so far into the weeds that it becomes completely inappropriate of what they're asking for. So depending on the size of your company, the complexity of your company, the due diligence period may be 2 weeks, it may be 30 days. Again, the more prepared you are ahead of time before even listing your company, the easier all of this is. You can have all of these documents scanned and in electronic files in a Dropbox or on thumb drives. You can have all of this prepared ahead of time, and it's simply just a quick data dump and giving them access to that Dropbox folder, etc. So, okay. All right. Hang on just a second. Okay. Stand by a second. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's deal progression. Oh, also, what you need to do is stay really, really healthy and really strong. You need to do everything it takes to be able to keep your muscles and stay happy. And so this is a diagram of somebody with really big muscles that's really, really healthy. There is a ton of emotion in dealing with due diligence, revealing your company to everybody, in going through all of these communication loops, etc., etc. It is extremely stressful. there's a lot of unknowns at this stage of the game. Lots and lots and lots of them. And so the stress goes up, 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 and it wants to drive you down, 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 and you just can't afford to get sick at this point. So whatever your coping mechanisms are, I really recommend owners at this stage of the game spend a lot of effort in keeping themselves healthy. We got to pay attention to the food we eat. We got to, whatever spiritual dynamic or emotional stabilizing dynamics, tools that we use them. Any little half-day breaks that you can take, whatever it takes to keep you physically strong and emotionally clear, definitely use all those instruments. I would highly recommend that sellers not take vacations right here. I highly recommend that they do not take on any new projects, either in the business, that they don't do any remodeling projects in their house, that they don't try to adopt a child at this point of their life, etc. Minimize the distractions and stressors everywhere else in your life to be ready and available to manage all of the crazy details and the complexity of the issues that come up during due diligence and right after in the fifth phase of selling your business. Okay. All right, so let me get down to the next spot. And all right, so now let's talk about legal. And this is my diagram of a gavel, of a judge's gavel, right? So the attorneys need to earn their keep right here. And the way they do that is they make sure that the legalese is caught to avoid any tripwires. Okay? And because tripwires cost a lot of money in penalties. For example, I think I used this example before, that there was a clause in somebody's lease that said that if you sell your company, in order to transfer the lease, there's a $75,000 fee associated with that. Thankfully, an attorney caught that before the seller actually listed the company. So attorneys really make their money right here because they're avoiding huge fees, penalties, and lawsuits later on. Post-close lawsuits are extremely expensive and very frustrating because you've sold your business, you thought you were done with it, and now all of a sudden they're coming after you in the court system. Paying for a good attorney who has transactional experience, who's done merger and acquisition activity before, is worth their weight in gold at this point. I would pay for the best attorney you can. I would go out of your community purposely to go find an attorney that has M&A experience, especially in your industry and especially for the size of business that you have. They are going to find things that are going to keep you out of trouble. Also, when the buyer comes back after due diligence and formally proposes the buyout agreement, there's going to be all sorts of legalese in that buyout agreement, and there's all sorts of snares and traps in there that are purposely written for the benefit of the buyer. Your attorney will catch those and negotiate those to either become neutral or to become reworded such that it's in your advantage. Okay, so it's kind of like there's a danger sign over here. Your attorney is going to be able to recognize that, and they're going to say, we're going to go this way with that legalese, and they're going to reword it, and they're going to be able to make basically turn lemons into lemonade right here. So that is incredibly important, how much that makes a difference. Also, right here in this section of the closing is making sure that your CPA or your tax attorney are able to recognize and converse with you about the suggestion of the money that's involved in the deal. So actually, let me hang on just a second. I'm going to pull something together here. All right, so this is the progression of a deal. You start with a listing, right? And then you sign an NDA. And then you have a letter of intent. And then you have due diligence. Okay? And then from due diligence, that goes to a suggested deal. They put forth the deal terms. Okay? And then it goes into the the purchase and sales agreement and all the legal documents. Okay, and then it comes down to the day of closing. Okay, so the fifth phase is all of this right here. Okay, that's phase 5. So when you get out of due diligence right here and you go into the deal terms, what the deal terms are is they've looked under the hood, they've looked at all the due diligence documents about your company, and now they're saying, aha, we're going to adjust the letter of intent to a formal offer under these new terms. And so now the negotiation goes back and forth. Now that we've seen what your company really is, we're saying that we're going to give you $1 million instead of $2 million. And then that communication cycle goes around of, okay, well, I'm not willing to accept $1 million, but if you pay me $1.5 million and you include this or that, then I'd be willing to do that. So this whole cycle of negotiations happens right here. And as the financial value of the deal that's been written down and suggested, your tax attorney can tell you the financial impact of what they're offering, which then allows you to be able to respond and negotiate a financial impact that's more to your advantage. So sometimes it's worth taking $250,000 in compensation for a non-compete agreement instead of $250,000 in the purchase price, because the tax impact on a NDA compensation is different than the capital gains tax rate if that $250,000 was in the price of the buyout. So those little details like that, that's why your tax attorney is well worth their money and why you need to find a good one. Also the same thing with all the legal structures that we talked about. So, okay, so you're going to be going back and forth right in here in this zone quite a bit in negotiation. Your attorney is going to be heavily involved in this aspect of these two things. Once you've agreed on the deal terms, then your attorney needs to go over the legal documents. And so either the buyer or the seller comes up with the initial document, but trust me, whoever comes up with the initial draft, the other party is going to look at it and start changing it. And this is where the lawyers go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was great because my attorneys have always said, okay, well, this is what they're suggesting. Here's the pros of that paragraph. Here's the cons of that paragraph. Here's the potential situation and what it would cost you if this happens. Here's how you could reword it so it reduces that risk. And this is that kind of conversation with my attorneys is where I realized how important it is to have attorneys who speak my language in my verbiage instead of speaking in legalese that sounds impressive. And so I really encourage you, the work you did up front early on in phase 1 and 2 of finding a good attorney that communicates well with you, it pays off big time right here because they let you know what the future holds for you if certain things happen based on what's written in the legal documents of the buyout. All right, so now there needs to be the closing. Actually, let me put you right here. There's something I've really got to point out is in the face of both the deal terms. Again, here in the deal terms, actually I'm going to use a highlighter right here. In the deal terms and in the legal documents, what you need to really do quite a bit of is ask questions. Any little thing you're not sure about, definitely ask. This is the time to ask those questions. It can be very expensive at the close or after you sell your company to find out that one thing I didn't ask about cost me $50,000. That is a real frustration point because I didn't take the time to ask or be aggressive enough or assertive enough to ask the question about something earlier on at this phase of the game. All right, the other thing you can do here too that's always worth the time is a lot of education. And as much as you can afford to get educated, read books, blogs, etc., have great advisors, even have a transaction coach. If you have somebody that's a transaction coach, that it's not your broker, it's not your CPA, it's not your attorney. They're not. They don't have any commission from the sale of your deal. They don't have any financial impact whether your company sells or not. You literally pay them a monthly retainer just to be your independent third-party coach and a sounding board. It becomes great value. You pay $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 a month for one of these coaches, and it gives you the freedom to make sure that you can ask any question you have just to know what's going on. To be able to ask the question of, well, this is happening, or the lawyer said this, is that even normal? That's what a transaction coach does a great job of, is it gives you that education so you know that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, or just for your peace of mind, or even for your partner's peace of mind or your spouse's peace of mind. That's what a transaction coach is great for. So definitely spend the time and the effort in staying educated, and rely on yourself to be able to get that education. Okay, now we come up to the closing. All right, what's going to go on at the closing? Okay, so this is going to be a door right here, and that's suggesting that we're at the close. We're almost done with this phase 5. Now, this is like chasing cats. There are so many details involved in all of the documentation that's being prepared that it's just crazy cats running everywhere. All these little threads of information, threads of this, threads of that, much less you're trying to run your company at the same time. All of this spaghetti mess is happening. Just know that it's going to be like this, okay? Also is recognizing that you're going to have to notify your staff at some point. It's always a challenge as a seller to not tell our staff that we're considering selling our company or that we're close to it. Our staff have loyalty to us. We have loyalty to them. We have an obligation for their income and to give them a stable work environment, and selling the company threatens that, right? So it threatens that. It challenges that integrity of loyalty. And in my personal experience, I have chosen to only let my key employees know that are integral to the business, and I let them know early and up front. And the regular employees, I don't tell them, is because most of my transactions have always been that the company has continued forward and that they've been gainfully employed, and so the stability of their income is maintained. And so that's the choices I've made. Other sellers have made different choices. I personally think my advice is it's individual to you. You need to have a transaction advisor that understands you, understands your business, that's going to help you make that decision of what's best for you, for your staff, and for the integrity of those relationships, and the integrity of your business once it gets sold. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to deal with is, once you get to the day of closing, there's going to be a table with lots of chairs and lots of attorneys sitting around the table. And so there's going to be your side, there's going to be their side, etc. And there's going to be lots and lots of paper that's going around. Now, the thing is that all of this paper should have been reviewed by you and your lawyers before today. The key is, the trick that I've always done is I've always picked, and hopefully no buyers or future buyers of my companies are watching this, but my trick is I pick out a couple key paragraphs that are integral to what I want out of the deal, and I go and I check and make sure that the verbiage is exactly what I signed off on. It's not version 2, it's not version 3, but it's actually the final version of the document that I signed off on. And I check, and if those are not accurate at the day of closing on that table, then I stop and I say, guys, this isn't the right version. Please go print the other version out. And you know what? We're all humans. It easily could have been just a mistake of the Word document not being filed in the right place, and it was printed out by mistake. The key is that what we sign on that day is what the version is that's legally required. So make sure that you slow down and you check that. And if you need somebody else to sit in your room with you to help to review this, then do it. If you need a second attorney from your firm to sit with you just to help you double check stuff, then pay for them to be there. $100, $250, $500 an hour to catch a $200,000 mistake is well worth that money. Okay? All right, so attorneys in the table. Now, there's going to be a transfer of money. And what's really cool is there's a document that's called, there's different names for it, but basically a distribution of funds. And this document says, okay, this dollar amount goes to pay off that loan, and this dollar amount is going to be transferred to settle this lease. This dollar amount is going to go to the landlord to buy out some aspect of it. Maybe you had some money that was associated with some real estate, and so that's going to go to such and such a trust to buy the real estate, and then this money is what's going to go directly to the seller's bank account. And so this document details all of that transaction, and at the very bottom is the balance that says this is the total purchase price of the buyout. And so this number right here gets segmented out into all of these little dollar amounts that go to all of these locations on the day of closing. And a couple days ahead of time, there's going to be some information back and forth about what bank with what account number, routing number there is for each one of those recipients, et cetera, et cetera. And you approve that document, you verify that document ahead of time. So on the day of closing, the disbursement of funds can happen. And one of the fun things is to be able to keep an eye on your bank account and watch that balance jump way up when the money comes in from electronic transfer of funds. That is a great moment. I highly recommend that you hold off and be with your spouse or your partner or loved ones or even by yourself, but have a moment to treasure it when you see on your computer screen or on your app when that dollar amount pops into your bank account and you see that big balance for the first time. It's very exciting, and you need to definitely enjoy that moment. All right, wrapping this up, let's talk about warning signs. There are odd delays. There's odd requests. Okay, so you got to watch out for the oddities here. There can be incompetency. And again, I'm talking again back up here about this whole process here. If anywhere in phase 5, you need to be aware of anything that's odd or any incompetency in anybody with your advisors, your brokers, your buyers, whatever. Okay? Now, there is a huge issue that always comes up. There is always a 12th hour last minute dynamic that is a complete curveball. It will always happen no matter what within the last day, the last week, the last 2 weeks. There's going to be something that's going to change the value of the deal by a couple percentage points. Just know it's going to happen. Now, here's my advice. It's better to lose a couple percentage points of money than it is to ruin the whole chance of getting any money at all. Don't haggle over 2% of the deal and risk losing 98% of the deal and the buyer walks away. If there's a sticking point with the buyer and it's only a 1 or 2 or 3 percentage point impact on the deal, then just concede the point and let it go. It happens all of the time. Selling a company is so complex, there's always something that comes up at the last minute. Just know that ahead of time. Okay. All right, now let's look, and I think it's just about it. Okay. Anything less than a pure professional can tank a deal during phase 5. On the seller side, on the buyer side, if there's anybody that's not being professional, their behavior can tank a deal. Their incompetency of not getting things done, of losing out on the timeline, can kill a deal. So be vigilant about everybody being professional, everybody working well together, everybody doing what they're supposed to do. If all of those things happen, all of those things come together, then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to take a very complex transaction that's going to take 6 to 12 months. You're going to be able to realize the impact financially on your life, and you're going to be able to win. You're going to be able to get the money, and you're going to be able to get freedom. And what I love most is freedom of time. Having sold companies, having money in the bank, and the freedom to be able to do what I want to do has been the best part about selling my companies. My encouragement for you, as you've looked at the big picture of what it takes to be able to sell your company, is look at your why and understand what your why is, but also understand what you'll lose if you don't sell your company. You've done a great job watching these videos to be able to understand the big picture. Now that you've got an overview of what it takes to be able to sell your company, I'd love to hear from you on your next steps and what your thoughts are. If you need any little details, you can go to prep2exit.com, and our phone number is up there, our email is there. Feel free to contact us. We want to work with sellers like you that are trying to move forward and have their business ready for sale. So whether it's a sudden sale or whether it's a planned sale, you're going to be able to walk through it and have a great chance to be able to make it to closing, get your exit, and enjoy life on the other side. This is Brian, founder of prep2exit.com. I look forward to seeing you on another video series.